it's hard, or it's frustrating that I still sometimes let that anger or wanting to hear that I'm sorry boil back up. Because if I'm waiting on that to forgive, it's never going to happen. Well, last time we were here, Mr. Sargent, we were moving on, skimming across our divorce experiences, and we wanted to talk a little bit about forgiveness today. Mm-hmm. It's a tough one.
Right. After we left last week, the conversation was centered around forgiveness, like forgiveness of ourselves and maybe our spouse in the context of the divorce and the ending of the relationship. But between that last time we talked and today, I guess I spent a lot of time thinking about what it really meant to me, and I found that forgiveness, I mean, it's such a broader topic, and not only broader in the sense of the divorce, but like how lack of forgiveness or unresolved forgiveness in your life colors everything, and how much it colored my relationship with my then wife.
Yeah, I think my forgiveness that I've struggled with is a little more on the end of the divorce, finding out about some things and some lies and things going on that I had to dig up and uncover. There really wasn't a lot of honesty at the end about what was going on. And I've waited for a long time to hear that. Just, I'm sorry, being betrayed by someone that you were supposed to trust the most. But I realized right away, holding on to that anger or waiting for that I'm sorry that still has yet to come after almost 7 years, I have to go ahead and forgive. And I mean, I do bounce back and forth between, okay, focus on where you are now. How do you feel now? And I'm happy where I am. So it's hard, or it's frustrating that I still sometimes let that anger or wanting to hear that I'm sorry boil back up. Because if I'm waiting on that to forgive, it's never going to happen.
I understand that. I'm sitting and just kind of thinking about how that. I guess my question is, have you found that's held you back?
I'm assuming it is. I don't know for sure. If I got it, I don't know if that would end all the ebb and flow of thinking, oh, I'm totally over this, or I've totally forgiven. I go through, people are just doing the best that they can do, and everyone deserves to be happy, so whatever route they take to get there. Part of me says that, but then on the other hand, it's very hurtful, and I feel like sometimes I need that to move on, but I don't necessarily know if that would change anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's...
That wasn't very clear.
No,
See, I'm still unsure. I mean, even
right.
After all this time.
I agree. I think it's a fluid process. Maybe it's something that it's not static. It's not an event. I was sitting there thinking, my mind's going a mile a minute. It's such a metaphor for life. And you just have to walk through. We should, hopefully, learning as we get older to walk through life each day with offering more forgiveness, right? And that's tough. And I was thinking, and I'm probably going to get a little bit vulnerable here in this conversation, but last week talking about how when you get to that point in the whole process where you had this upheaval of relationship, and whatever point you start to get, you get a little quiet, or your mind gets a little quiet, where you have time to sit with yourself and sit with your feelings and sit with what just happened. Everybody's different. I think for me, it was not only dealing with the guilt and the forgiveness, but I think it was the first time that I really took a strong look at what else in my life was I still holding on to. Maybe what bitterness, what resentment, what, unresolved feelings, certainly unwillingness to forgive. And boy, I tell you, it went so much deeper and so further back than my marriage. And that in itself has been an ongoing process, a huge process. So.
And you just didn't realize all that baggage until the divorce, like until that big event shook you? You had never really realized?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I could see all the signs, right? The health signs and the fragmentation of just feeling not like I didn't really have my shit together. I don't know. It was just this sense of just going day to day and pushing through. And I look back now and I say, I was holding on to so much more. And I know that it really affected how I showed up in the marriage, and I own that. I think back to, and I was actually just thinking about this morning before we came on here, about the relationship with my parents growing up and how there was so much, I harbored a lot of resentment and a lot of quote unquote unmet expectations. I felt how they should have showed up in my life and in my relationship with my dad. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but so I don't dominate the conversation here.
That's okay.
I'd love to contrast with, with you. I mean, so we can just kind of jump back and forth. But yeah, so for me, and again, this was, and they're not separate, but I think it's just important to realize when you're up against something really stressful or traumatic in your life, to step back. I heard this saying a long time ago, and I think there's so much truth in it. It said, distance is the value of perspective. And the farther back that you can step from a situation, the better perspective you have. And I think, so to your question, yeah, it wasn't really until this first upheaval in my life of the divorce where I was forced to step back and take a broader look at everything in my life and everything that I've been carrying. I harbored a lot of resentment against my dad. That it's easy to sit and say, well, it is what it is. Like, he was a strong disciplinarian. Not that that's a problem. I mean, it certainly gave my brothers and I a real work ethic and kind of a resolve of maybe a tenacity to just kind of lean into hard situations. But you look back, it was borderline abuse. I mean, for me, I mean, now, not that I didn't deserve to be not that I did not deserve to be corrected. I certainly drove him to their wits' end, but I mean, he would just, there were 4 words you never wanted to hear in my house. And my mother's name was Barbara. It was Barbara, close the curtains.
Aww.
Because that meant that the curtains were getting closed
funny.
and shit was going to get real, and it's just how he grew up. He'd wear my ass out with the belt, and I'm talking, pants dropped bent over, and just till you couldn't even breathe anymore. And but it wasn't just that; it was this sense of just not connection. Like he was just, I just felt like there wasn't this connection. Like I didn't feel like he was showing up being the dad I needed him to be. Now, I know that as a younger kid, I needed a lot of like praise and affirmation, and he was just in a place of life where he wasn't able to do that. I remember, I was really athletic and I enjoyed it, but I got into wrestling in junior high and high, and I was really good at it. And they never once came to any of my matches or anything. And I'm not blaming them, but I just kind of lost heart.
Yeah.
And I didn't really pursue it. So my point is, these are all these little boxes, all these little buckets that I began carrying.
Yeah.
And then there was an upheaval in my house when I was about 10, where my grandfather died unexpectedly, and then there was this they auctioned everything in the house, so we had nothing, and then my mother had given birth to my younger brother, so it was this tremendous upheaval all the way around. We didn't have any money, and and they were just surviving. But with that came this sense of just complete breakdown, and then there was and then it turned to anger, because that's just the way my dad knew to express his only outlet, and it turned into abuse. And then so I watched. I watched that.
Yeah, I'm sorry you had to experience that. I can't really relate to that, so
Right.
this episode is really going to kind of be more about that. Do you ever feel like at any point in your dad's life while he was still here that he realized like just how hard he was on you guys, or if he was ever sorry for some of the choices he made?
You know, it's interesting. I think if you were to sit down and talk to all my brothers, there was 3 of us, so I'm the middle. There were 3 of us that were born within 3 years of each other, and then there was a 10-year gap, and then my parents had 2 more children, which are boys. And so if you sat each one of us down and interviewed us, I think you'd get an entirely different perspective on what the home life was like. There'd be a lot of things that were similar, but there was a different perspective, and I think a lot of it's because how we were wired and how we showed up and what we needed, and so I don't want to certainly not speak on behalf and say it was just one way, but for me, that really, it never happened, and until maybe right before he passed away, and it was. And I was sitting with him maybe a few weeks before he had passed, and he was sick. He'd been sick for a while, and I remember he just kind of broke down, and he just kept repeating, saying, "I'm sorry." And I think that it was about so many things,
Right.
I just happened to be sitting there with him.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't really say that we had this, great conversation where we unpacked everything. And
Right.
I think we were always trying to meet each other somewhere, but we just couldn't get there.
I know you've healed a lot since his passing, I know, because we've talked about it. But it's still an ongoing process, right? So I guess maybe when you're hurt to those depths, do you ever really get over it? Is there a...
Well, I think it's, there's that analogy of, you get injured and, you get cut open and, it heals. There's always a scar.
Yeah.
But I think in this human experience we go through, I'm not sure you never get over it in the sense you don't forget it. But I absolutely do think that there is, I think it's possible to be victorious over it and have those situations end up serving you in your life instead of being hindrances or blocks. And I think that for me, most of that stuff that I just shared is now experiences that maybe I've I won't say mastered, but now I've been able to turn them into energy and fuel to strengthen me in moving forward. And also, it's humbled and softened me. I'm much more empathetic and sympathetic than I used to be, and that's ongoing.
Yeah.
So, so it's just the sense of dealing with that and realizing how many things in your life you bring along with you and you bring into relationships. And so, everyone has baggage. There's a lot of cliches, but the reality of it is if you want to have a really strong and growing and loving relationship, you've got to deal with that stuff, and the first thing is just, I think, sitting down and actually admitting that you got a lot of shit you got to deal with. We all do. And everybody's story is different, and I'm not in any way saying mine's the worst, but they're my experiences, right? And they're my experiences that shaped my life, both good and both bad. And, for me, and I'm thankful that I had all that time between when I first began to unpack that and deal with it till the time that I met you, because I'm not sure I would have been ready to show up.
Well, you've shown up for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, forgiveness is there's so much to talk about, right? And,
Yeah.
and you can't just,
I mean, I don't even know what to say to your forgiveness. Mine seems so trivial now, but yeah, everybody has their own things that they want to give forgiveness or feel forgiveness from, and
I think
it's a
when
tough
you,
subject.
I think when you first take a step in the direction of, like, you want to heal, you want to understand and start going down that road of forgiveness and healing. Once you start that, like once you make that intention, then it's like a catalyst. I feel, at least was for me. Then it was slow at first, but then it brought all kinds of other things up, and with each thing, whether it was something in my family or in my past marriage or other things with, whatever other people, relationships, the more I did it, the more I leaned into it, the more I was willing to experience the crappiness of all the feelings and going through that dark night of the soul, the more I wanted to.
Yeah.
So the more I did it, the more I realized, oh, this feels good. I feel like I'm gaining perspective and I'm growing, and I kept wanting to do it. And so now, it's like that's the first thing. When something's not quite right in my life, that's kind of the first thing I go to, is like, where am I sitting with my feelings? Am I withholding something from somebody? Empathy, love, forgiveness, grace, or am I not? And that typically is my litmus test.
Yeah.
So,
You've taught me a lot with unpacking feelings. I'm still a work in progress on that, but
I don't know. I think you've come, just in the time I've known you, you've come a long way. Like, you're such an empathetic and caring and selfless person. You seem like you're always willing to just give that person the benefit of the doubt and listen. But I've also noticed that you're more open now to talk about things, and so I appreciate the fact that what you're sharing now about how it's still a road that you're traveling down, and that you realize you may not get that I'm sorry. You may never get it.
yeah.
But that won't stop you or us from moving forward and making sure that we make sure we're giving that to the people that we love in our lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on this subject again as we go forward, because it does seem to color and permeate every area of our lives. But yeah, there's so much freedom and peace that comes along with forgiveness.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Till next time.
Till next time.
I love you.
I love you too.